All right, if everyone could take their seats, we are about to get started. All right. My name is Nick Carr, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Chief Strategist for Stand With Crypto. We are uniting and coalescing the 52 million Americans that own crypto in the United States into one voice. And we are so excited to be hosting the first in the nation, historic moment, the first in the nation crypto presidential forum. Very exciting. We are so thankful to be hosting this event alongside our incredible media partner, CoinDesk. And thank you for everyone who is here present and also everyone who is tuning in on the live stream. Thank you so much for joining us. First, before we get started with our first presidential candidate, we have a few opening remarks. I'd like to now turn it over to Neil Vivek, the Executive Director of the New Hampshire Institute of Politics.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the New Hampshire Institute of Politics here at St. Anselm College. As you can see, we're a nationally recognized institute. We have a lot of events, a lot of things coming up in the next month or so. So if you like what you see here today, please sign up and come. Most of our events are free and open to the public, and we really are excited that you're here today. So thank you.
And now I'd like to welcome to the stage for a few opening remarks, the Majority Leader of the State House of New Hampshire, Jason Osborne.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Where's the teleprompter? No? Okay. Well, don't blame me if I say any naughty words today. Hey, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for the folks for sponsoring and putting this event on. It's a great honor to be the hosting state of the first ever presidential crypto forum. And it's a great way to reinforce the first in the nation primary that we have here in New Hampshire that some folks are trying to take away from us and do from time to time. And we're happy to defend that place that we have, and we're happy that you all are helping us to do that. So I'm hoping to learn a lot today about the only thing that I know about crypto is that a number of years ago, I traded a Bitcoin for a bag of ice. And a few years later was able to trade a Bitcoin for a John Deere tractor. And I'm hoping that any day now I can trade a Bitcoin for a flying car or something like that. But again, welcome, and look forward to meeting the rest of you today, and have a great time.
Now I'd like to welcome to the stage Cathedra Manufacturers, the president and COO, Drew Armstrong, and the head of manufacturing and operations, Isaac Fithian.
Hello, everyone. My name is Drew Armstrong. I'm the president and COO of Cathedra Bitcoin. We are a publicly traded Bitcoin mining company in the Toronto Stock Exchange that believes that sound money and abundant energy are the keys to human flourishing. We're expressing this belief by building diversified Bitcoin mining operations across the U.S., both on and off grid. When AJ Scalia, the CEO, and I were recruited to run Cathedra about 2 years ago, we were looking for interesting ways to expand, and we were put in touch with a gentleman named Isaac Fithian. Isaac Fithian is an autodidact, a New Hampshireite, and was a co-founder of a waste methane Bitcoin mining company called Great American Mining. He was our first hire, and because of Isaac, we decided to set up shop in Coos County, New Hampshire, for building a small manufacturing operation. And so without further ado, since he's the reason why we're here, would like Isaac to speak a few words.
Thank you, Drew. I'd like to thank Nick Carr, the presidential candidates, and all the folks who work behind the scenes to make this event a reality. I stand before you as a humble New Hampshireite and Bitcoin advocate. I was born in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I grew up in Somersworth and the Lakes region. I also attended the University of Franklin Pierce in Rindge, New Hampshire, and I now live in the White Mountains with my wife and 2 children. I consider myself a through and through Granite Stater. What I love, well, there's many things I love about New Hampshire, but if I could capture the essence of what it means to be a New Hampshireite, it's that we here in New Hampshire are a champion for the sovereign individual. We believe in civil discourse amongst diverse views. It's one of the reasons that we cherish our position as first in the nation primary. We believe that we should hear perspectives to their end and place them on balanced scales. I have a simple story. It's a Bitcoin story, and I'd like to share it with you today. I started, as many people do, a skeptic. I thought, surely this is some extravagant ploy with nefarious purpose. And I had a good friend who encouraged me to take a second look at blockchain. And the more questions I asked, the stronger my conviction grew that this was truly a brand new technology and elegant. Anyone, anywhere in the world can now verify the authenticity and time of information. And it has dramatic impacts on our daily life. So I began by trading Ethereum in 2016. In 2017, I began building my own mining rigs and operating them. In 2018, I was the first hire for a exploratory mining project that would eventually become Great American Mining. I'm incredibly thankful to Tom Massaro and Todd Garland, who took a chance on me and allowed me to grow my Bitcoin skill set. During my time at Great American Mining, I realized that Bitcoin would do more than transform finance. It was also creating innovation in infrastructure and energy. I realized that Bitcoin is energy agnostic. It can help improve the profitability of solar panels and coal plants. It can allow nuclear plants and slow to ramp down biomass plants participate in small time scale energy markets, increasing their profitability. Bitcoin can often be confusing for folks who are used to choosing a side, because the view that I've come to is that it is a tool for human flourishing. I'd like to tell you a story about a good friend of mine, Antoine Gisore. He's a war refugee from Congo, Africa, and in college he was my roommate. And today him and I are still great friends, and we catch up from time to time. Antoine each year celebrates his birth month because he doesn't know the actual day he was born. He was born in a remote village in Africa. No birth certificate, no home address, no taxpayer identification number. How do you bank someone like that? With Bitcoin, a smartphone, a solar panel, and internet access, and all of a sudden you can bank that individual. Bitcoin will energize the economic potential of billions of people. It will give them a voice in the financial world. Bitcoin is a unit of account. It is a means of exchange for folks throughout all the world, regardless of economic status, regardless of where you were born. It's a truly powerful tool. But beyond raising folks out of poverty and giving them financial services that we take for granted in the West, I have also seen how Bitcoin can foster and forge innovation, and it can grow both developing countries and developed countries. That's what I've seen in my career in Bitcoin. I started down this path in bringing manufacturing jobs to New Hampshire from my time as a high school math teacher in Berlin, New Hampshire. I realized that my short math classes were not enough to inspire my students in the way that I wanted to. Many of my students loved the community, but believed they had to go elsewhere to seek opportunity. And I thought, surely in New Hampshire, we can keep some of these bright young people here. They should be allowed to thrive in their home state. And I just want to speak briefly to Berlin. It was once a beacon for the American dream. In the early 20th century, it was the largest producer of paper in the world and had a thriving, diverse society as immigrants came from all over the world to live and work there. It's a truly special place. And today, well, what I said to Drew and AJ when I first joined Cathedra, I'll tell to you now. Berlin is a place filled with a constellation of infrastructure, with good, hardworking people and industrial know-how. And it seemed like the perfect place to help my home, and it's good business too. There's incredibly talented and smart people here in New Hampshire, and I will speak to the excellent welding programs that we have up there. Both the high school and the community college churn out some of the best welders in the country, and I've seen their work firsthand as they've been building our proprietary rovers, our modular Bitcoin mining data centers. I just believe that Bitcoin is a force for good throughout the world. I believe that it can help everyone, rich and poor, no matter where you are in the world. And I've seen it. I've seen it help everyone across the spectrum, and I'm excited for its potential to bring jobs to my home state. Thank you for hearing me out, and thank you for the opportunity.
Right. And now I'd like to welcome to the stage Kara Calvert, Head of U.S. Policy for Coinbase.
Well, hello, and thank you all for having us. First, I just have to say how grateful I am for all of you being here. This is an absolute historic moment, and I was looking at all the photos around, and this one caught my eye. First in the nation. That is incredible. We are making history right now, and I could not be happier to have you all here. I'm also grateful to Stand With Crypto that really has taken, I think, something that was started in a very, frankly, in a meeting room where we were thinking, do we have users in every single congressional district? Okay, we do. Do we have advocates in every single congressional district? Well, let's send out an email and see if we do. Turns out within a week, we had people in every single congressional district. That's 435 districts, 435 members that needed to hear from their constituents about why they care about crypto. Okay, we know that we have people in every district. Well, then we had a few things happen, macroeconomic issues, a lot of different interests started boiling up. So we said, maybe we'll mint some NFTs. And within a month, we had minted 150,000 NFTs. So for all of you crypto native people, you know what that is. For all of you people who are not crypto native, those are non-fungible tokens. They were little tiny shields that looked a lot like this, that now this isn't an NFT, this is actually real. And oh my gosh, we had people everywhere. And we discovered this was so much bigger than Coinbase. It was so much bigger than any one company. It was truly about all of these Americans who decided we need rules. And this is the really incredible thing. For the first time ever, you had an industry come together that is starting to say, we want to grow and have crypto in the United States. How do we do that? We make sure we have rules of the road, a fair playing field. We know that we can have jobs, we can have innovation, we can have all of this stuff together in the United States if our policymakers come together and make a decision to do it. And they decide to do it in a bipartisan way. I've worked in Washington, D.C., please don't hold it against me, for 23 years. And I have never seen an industry come together in this type of a bipartisan, in any kind of way like this, where you come together from the right side and the left side. And sometimes I like to call it the circle of crazy in politics. It exists. That's a joke if nobody gets that it's a circle of crazy in politics. But really, you have people from the right and the left coming together to say, what kind of rules do we need for crypto? We need pro-consumer rules. We need pro-innovation rules. We need rules that allow for independence and autonomy and ownership. We need to allow data be owned by people and not by companies. We need to allow the system to be updated for the financial use cases. We need it to be updated for healthcare. You name a system in the United States, it can be improved by blockchain technology and crypto. So we're so excited to bring all of these voices together to talk about it. And we have companies like, with Isaac coming up and telling you about how it's the future of his family and his community. We hear that across the United States. We've now done different events in Ohio, in Georgia, in Pennsylvania. I'm from Wyoming. We're seeing these types of transformational economic engines. That's really powerful stuff. And it's the first time it's ever been done. So we're so excited that all of you are here. And I'm really excited the fact that for the first time ever, we have presidential candidates who are coming up to this stage to talk about the future of not just crypto, but of innovation in America. And I think that that's a really, really powerful thing when we think about it. It's something we haven't had center stage before. We often talk about US competitiveness, national security, jobs, economics, taxes, all of those things. But for the first time, innovation is taking center stage. And so again, as I think through where we're going, not just now, but in 2024 and beyond, 2024 is going to be a pivotal moment in America. It is going to be the time when everybody goes to the polls to decide, am I going to vote for a candidate who supports innovation, jobs, the jobs of the future, the next iteration of the internet, the infrastructure? Am I going to do that? Or am I going to vote for a guy or a woman who may not like those types of things. So very few people are single issue voters. I think in this case, you can be one. That's okay. Vote for crypto. That's good. And I would just ask that you stand with crypto if you haven't already joined. Stand with Crypto. It is an amazing organization that's going to give you all a voice. And with that, I will hand the mic back to Stand with Crypto because ultimately they're the ones in charge here. So, Nick.
Thank you, Kara. And now I'd like to introduce the moderator for today's events, the Deputy Managing Editor of CoinDesk, Jesse Hamilton, who has been covering crypto policy for a number of years. So I'd like to welcome now Jesse Hamilton to the stage.
Appreciate it. So as a news organization, CoinDesk is, of course, no stranger to crypto history, and we're very excited to be here for another moment in that history today. I spend my days in Washington covering the ins and outs of digital assets policy, a topic that can be as lively as the industry itself. This coming election is incredibly important for many reasons, really, but definitely for those who are concerned about how the U.S. government is coming to grips with these innovations. Now, policy issues have taken a real spotlight at CoinDesk, and we'll again be devoting a whole stage at our annual event, Consensus, in Austin, Texas, next year. We also just had a policy gathering in Washington. My point being, even with astounding and colorful headlines in this industry every day, these wonky regulatory questions can be just as important. Of course, the primary here in New Hampshire is one of the presidential election cycle's opening events, and it's just 6 weeks away, if you can believe that. Presidential hopefuls and media will be haunting Iowa and New Hampshire in earnest very soon. And by February, typically, we'll see the field of candidates narrow considerably, but we're still at the stage in which really anybody has a shot. We've got an incumbent Democratic president that's struggling with support, and a Republican field dominated by a former president under a legal cloud. But I'll be sitting down with 3 of our presidential candidates. And for the candidates in attendance, I'll ask them some of your questions in addition to my own. So we'll now go ahead and begin inviting the presidential candidates to the stage one at a time. We'll give them a chance to share some thoughts before sitting down for some of our questions. Now, the audience questions have been submitted in advance, and I'll go ahead and read those out to each candidate. And our order will be Governor Asa Hutchinson, Mr. Vivek Ramaswamy, and then Congressman Dean Phillips. And in between each, we'll have some other people giving some brief remarks as the next candidate prepares to take the stage. So with that explanation out of the way, let's introduce our first candidate today. Former Governor Asa Hutchinson was until this year running the government in Arkansas. He's now, of course, seeking the Republican nomination for president. You may have seen him in the opening GOP debate where he was noted for being the most arguably calm of the voices, I think. Now we'll get the chance to see him here, and we'll get him to speak on a topic that we haven't heard much from him on, and that's digital assets, of course. Now, let's hear from Governor Hutchinson directly, and then he and I can sit down and have a discussion. Governor, welcome.
Thank you. It is great to be here today. It's good to be back in New Hampshire, and thanks for everybody showing up. I am excited about this forum, but before I jump into digital assets, I want to talk just a little bit more about the presidential campaign. Then we're going to look at the crypto market itself before we have our question and answer session. But it is great to be on St. Anselm campus again. I've been here a couple times. You all great host, and I hope to be here for debate before the New Hampshire primary. So what a great venue for that, and I look forward to being back. And you know, there's
there's always been this argument that somehow if you're running against Donald Trump for president, then everybody should consolidate and behind one candidate, there's just a one-on-one contest. You've heard that before. Well, there's a poll that came out today, and this is an Iowa poll, we've had 8 candidates drop out of the race. Most recently, Mike Pence, Tim Scott dropped out, and Governor Burgum. And guess what's happened, though? Donald Trump moved up. He moved up in the Iowa poll, and that tells me that competition in there is good. And the argument that you ought to drop out to consolidate support against Donald Trump, that strategy doesn't work. And it's sort of like distribution of ideas. The more that you have out there, the more support that they build. And so I want you to know that I'm in this race. I plan on being on the New Hampshire primary right here. And we're filing today in Colorado and other states. So long race, work hard at this and get your ideas out. And then let me come back to crypto. First of all, I want to compliment New Hampshire. New Hampshire had the commission that was set up under Governor Sununu and the leadership of the House and Senate made recommendations. And of course, they looked at crypto mining as an opportunity to expand jobs and the opportunities here in New Hampshire. And what was instructive to me is that they thought it would actually help competition and bring down energy costs for New Hampshire. And so there's some benefits that they recognize. I compliment them on their leadership on that. Whenever you look at the whole idea of digital assets, cryptocurrency, and all of the permutations of that, whenever this started, of course, the entire public, not entire public, but much of the public was skeptical as to whether this was going to be real or not, partly because of difficulty in understanding, but also just that they didn't see this happening. And so I'm here to tell you that what you're doing is long-lasting and it is important. And whenever you look at a $1 trillion industry that you have created, it is here to stay. And I want to assure you that I want, under my administration, to make sure that crypto assets, the crypto industry flourishes. Let me repeat that. I want the crypto industry to flourish in America and that the United States will lead. To accomplish this, we have to do a couple things. First of all, it's been emphasized, we need a clarity in rules. Secondly, we need to have continued consumer confidence. And thirdly, you need to have the ability to code with the workforce and with individuals and leaders in our country. And fourthly, you need to have affordable energy. All of those are important ingredients for the crypto market to continue to grow and flourish. Whenever you're looking at the clarity in rules, obviously Congress needs to act. I don't want to leave this just to the bureaucracy and the rulemaking authority, but Congress needs to act and provide guidance. That's first thing. And then secondly, it's important for you in the industry to know exactly what the rules are. And today, it should not be guidance by enforcement. It should be guidance by clarity and rules that are set in place so that you know exactly what needs to be done and to minimize your risk as you act. And so whether, and I would say that I know there's a debate about the Commodities Future Trading Commission versus the SEC. Whatever you do, don't create a new bureaucracy because then you're going to have 3 to compete with. And so they can define it between those 2, make it clear, and go from there. Secondly, consumer confidence is absolutely essential, as you know. And to do that, the public needs to understand, one, the nature of the industry, how it works, how they can profit from it, how they can invest in it. Greater understanding is important, and that builds confidence. And then secondly, they need to be assured that this is going to be not a tool that can be used by terrorists or by criminal organizations. And we know in the industry that there's more transparency actually in the crypto market than there is in bank traditional financing. And so because of that transparency, it is actually a less attractive venue for terrorist or criminal organizations to participate in. That message needs to get out. And then I assure you, as somebody that's been Undersecretary at Homeland Security, I've been head of the DEA, I've been in the United States Congress, I've been in the private sector. And so I understand that you've got to have rules that are certain, and that you'd much rather have self-regulation and guidance versus government. Now, the government's going to have to step in to clarify the rules, but we all need to feel the same responsibility to make sure that we're good actors, that we are following the rules that are set, and that we are building consumer confidence by making sure the crypto marketplace is not something that criminals have access to, that we have good reporting requirements, that suspicious transaction requirements that are in place. The third thing, and I want to spend a moment on this, is the ability to code. Now, I take great pride in this because I come from Arkansas, and I got elected governor in 2014, and I campaigned on the concept that we ought to have computer science education, specifically computer coding in every high school in Arkansas. People looked at me and said, "You're never going to get elected with that theme." But I did get elected, and Arkansas became the first state to mandate computer coding to be taught in every high school. The result of that was we went from 1,100 students in Arkansas taking computer science to over 23,000. And that gives those young people opportunity. I said, you can run the world from your hometown in Gravette, Arkansas, on your front porch if you have access to high-speed internet and you know how to code. And that message resonates in rural America, the freedoms that you enjoy, but it allows us to compete with China. And I want America to compete with China. Whenever you look at the fact that when I became governor, 10% of the high schools in America offered computer science. Now it's up to 51%. Well, that means 49% of our high schools do not even offer computer science. And I assure you that most of those are located in the rural areas of our country. And so as President of the United States, I want to move computer science so that it is offered in over 90% of the high schools in America. I will do that by incentives, and I will do that by leadership. As governor, I went to over 80 high schools promoting computer science, the ability to code, and it persuaded students to take the course and the opportunities that come with that. If we're going to compete, and we will, and if we're going to win, technology has to be the front of it, and our computer science is the foundation for technology, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's blockchain, or whether it's crypto. And so let's build that foundation with clarity of rules, consumer confidence, and the ability to write code. Finally, it is about affordable energy. And I was proud of the fact that the top 5 states for crypto mining potential, one of them includes Arkansas, because we have affordable energy. I saw that Texas is also on the list, but many of the companies that are coming there to Texas are Chinese owned. And let me just tell you, I want to prohibit China from mining crypto here in the United States. Let's do it on our own. We don't need to have that. If we don't like them buying our farmland, why should they be coming in and utilizing our technologies and developing that here in the United States? And so we have to continue to have affordable energy. I want to produce, as President of the United States, more energy from every sector. Nuclear energy has to be an important part of it. The alternative energy sources need to be a key part of it, from biofuels to solar. We need to produce energy in this country to make sure that it's affordable for our citizens and for our industry. And so I'm delighted to be here to say crypto has to be a part of our future. And yes, I stand with crypto in your industry, and I want it to grow. I want it to prosper, and let's succeed, and let's compete, and let's win. Thank you all very much.
Thanks so much. Our audience, and according to some of the research, suggests tens of millions of Americans have at least some personal interest in cryptocurrencies or blockchain technology and the other innovations that sort of go into this next generation of online life. Have you or any family members invested in crypto or NFTs or anything of that sort?
Well, I trust through some of the funds, I have some assets there, but my claim to greater knowledge and experience is through my son-in-law, who's from New Jersey, who married my daughter, Sarah, and he is in technology and in blockchain technology. And so he has been informative of me, and he actually makes a living doing this.
Oh.
And so, his blockchain is in digital degrees, in certifications. And so we have a great family interest in it in that context. And I don't pretend to be an expert by any means. You can probably tell by some of the language that I use, but I understand the importance of technologies and the developments for the future. And I learned that whenever I was at Homeland Security, trying to protect America. And we had our men and women overseas fighting the global war on terrorism, but it was that computer geek that was digging into data and mining data, trying to determine the greatest risk to the United States of America. And that's what we relied upon to keep commerce flowing and to protect America. So that's my development of the interest in technologies led me to the Computer Science Initiative in Arkansas. And I continue to learn the new technologies and what the future holds.
Now, you've of course, as you outlined, been a federal official, though not as a financial regulator. So the bulk of your experience is in state government. What do you think the role of the states should be in governing crypto? Is there any way to move forward in the U.S., perhaps temporarily, in the absence of federal digital assets regulation, perhaps like the insurance industry, which is state regulated?
Well, I think it's preferable to have a national standard whenever you're looking at crypto investments and rules. I think you would all be struggling with 50 different state rules that might be developed. But what you do see is states that will innovate. And sometimes their innovation in rules will push the federal government to act. Whenever they're slow, I think state action and innovation drives federal policy. You mentioned my experience. I actually have probably the greater breadth of experience than most of the candidates for president at every level. Whenever I was in Congress, we last balanced the budget. Whenever the Bush administration, President Bush asked me to head up the DEA, Homeland Security, as I mentioned. Before that, I was a federal prosecutor. And so you're right, I haven't had I was not on financial services, I was on intelligence, and I was on judiciary. I certainly understand intellectual property, but it's through those experiences that I understand our technology. But the rulemaking certainly needs to start with Congress driving that issue.
Okay. You had a number of years as governor in Arkansas during crypto's rise, but your state wasn't among those that were particularly aggressive on digital assets policy, apart from, and you can correct the record here, the Innovation Council, I think you set up in 2019 to boost blockchain technology. So what would you say your strategy was on crypto when you were in office?
Well, I mean, first, the Computer Science Initiative, and secondly, we invested under my leadership in accelerator programs that would bring in new startup companies in technology in whatever area they were, and particularly in financial services. And we partnered with our financial services industry. The state invested, industry invested to bring in these startup technology companies. And the goal was that we'd be able to attract some of those in Arkansas, which we did. In addition, of course, whenever you're looking at our innovation, I had the future of transportation council, which was really flight. Now that's not crypto, but it is technology. It is about our future. Since I left the governorship in January, and they've had additional legislative action in that regard, and I think we've got it open now. I think you've got to have more education. I noticed that there was some consternation, actually made it where the local communities could not ban crypto mining, which was helpful at the state level, but you've got some local objections. And so that has to be overcome. But Arkansas should be wide open for it from a regulatory standpoint.
Are you on the federal level? You suggested Congress needs to act. Are you familiar with the current crypto legislative efforts in Congress right now? And if so, have you seen something you could support?
Well, I know that Congressman McHenry has introduced legislation, a number of different pieces of legislation last August. And I haven't studied them all in detail, but I do like the direction that Congressman McHenry has gone on this. And I think you need to have, clarity of whether it's the Commodities Trading Commission that has jurisdiction over digital assets that could be considered commodities versus the banking side, which the whole concept of SEC jurisdiction or a financial instrument is that there's a third party that is directing the profits and the outcomes of the profit motive. But of course, in blockchain, you have a distributive ownership that's out there and participation in it where it's not necessarily a third party. And so I think there's distinctions there. I'd like to just see that carefully defined so that you know whether you have to go to which commission.
You and a lot of people.
For direction. I know that there's another candidate in the race who wants to abolish the SEC and eliminate federal employees by 75%. I think that would be rather harmful to us getting the job done because you want to have rules, but you have to have enforcement with the rules that are in place. And you want them fair treatment. You want them clear that you know what good behavior is. But if you don't have enforcement, then you're going to have the criminal element come in and abuses, and the public won't have confidence. And so I am for reducing the federal bureaucracy. I'm going to reduce it by 200,000 workers. That's important. But let's be targeted about it and smart about it and recognize enforcement has a role in assuring the integrity of an industry and building consumer confidence.
So one of the big crypto topics in the election so far has been central bank digital currency, CBDCs. What's your view on whether the Federal Reserve should issue and manage a digital dollar?
They should not now. And here's the reason. And that is that the whole concept of blockchain is transparency and easy access to the blockchain and who contributes to that. And that means that the government has that access. And if you have a digital currency, then you've got the government knowing exactly the transactions that are made by the consumers. And, I don't think that the people who enjoy the Second Amendment want to have the government looking over their shoulder whenever they make their purchases, or you might be a libertarian in other reasons. But the public does not have that confidence of privacy, and there's, in contrast to the layers they have to go through in traditional banking transactions. And so that is the challenge. I do believe, we're in a competitive global situation, and you have other countries that have developed digital banking systems, central bank currencies. And I think we can continue to look at it, but until we have privacy issues assured, which I don't might be contradictory to the whole concept, we're not ready to move forward. And so I would be opposed to a central bank digital asset.
So, Governor, I think especially in light of your background, I'd be interested to hear your answer on this. The crypto industry seems worried about the Biden administration's enthusiasm for pursuing software developers who provide the technology others are using. Take the case of Tornado Cash, for instance. Do you think the creator of a platform or crypto tool should be held responsible for its illegal use?
Not unless there is an intent for its illegal use in the outset of it, because then you combine intent with action, and that crosses the line. But no, there should be immunity for software developers. We want their creativity. We want the protection for that, and then whoever takes that, if they, I mean, you can imagine any software that's developed that could be used for a criminal purpose that somebody else does. So I think you'd make that distinction there. But no, software developers need to be protected. Their innovation needs to be rewarded. Their risk-taking and their investment needs to be rewarded and protected. It's just like any other intellectual property that we develop here in the United States.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and move on to audience questions. So several folks asked variations of this question, but we'll deliver the one from Anna. In crypto, how do you plan to strike a balance between fostering innovation and ensuring consumer protection?
Well, I'm trying to think why that would be particularly difficult. And I think from a developer standpoint right now, you're very worried because the rules aren't clear. And you could have a rogue investigator or somebody that is overly aggressive that comes in and engages in an enforcement action, and that costs you a lot of money in the defense of that. So yes, I think that you do that balance by having clear rules. And when I say clear rules, that industry is allowed to comment on and shape and help guide. So clear rules is one. And then secondly, fair enforcement is the other part of that. And again, I go back to the fact you've got to have those enforcement as a part of that to ensure the consumer confidence. And the consumer confidence is critical to the growth of your industry. Everybody understands that. And so let's not shy away from the enforcement side. Let's understand its importance of it, but it should not be policy by enforcement. It's got to be policy by congressional action. And then I think we'll have the right balance.
Here's one from Brian. What are your thoughts on the potential of cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology to democratize access to capital and investment opportunities?
Well, I think that's the whole design of it. And that's what you're accomplishing. That's giving your developments, your investments, the opportunity to participate in a greater level of growth of your investment and your skill. And so to me, that's the design of it. And that allows greater people to participate in the development of wealth in our country. And to me, that's a good thing. I think that'll be healthy for our democracy. And right now, too many of the rules in our society benefit a small number of people that have worked through the system and have developed wealth. But if we can spread that out through ingenuity, through your investments and your hard work, then that's what our capitalist system and our democracy should reflect. And so to me, everybody in this room that wants to participate in that is doing something really good for our country.
Tom, Tom wanted to ask, the SEC was formed in the direct aftermath of the Great Depression and in a world of information scarcity. In your opinion, does it still serve a useful purpose in safeguarding markets, or is it merely a costly distortion mechanism?
SEC.
That's correct.
Well, you know, you've got banking regulators, you've got securities regulators, you've got insurance regulators, and then in Arkansas, we have all the same. I mean, I've got a securities department, I've got a banking department, and so they report to me as governor, and I sent the message to them that industry should be considered a partner with government regulators until they cross the line and violate the law. Then they're our adversary, or, you know, we go after them. And to me, that message in and of itself to our regulators gave us a business-friendly environment in our state. As president, I'm going to have a fundamental principle. I want the private sector of our economy to grow faster than the government sector. And whenever you set that principle in line, you reduce the regulatory environment. You have an attitude that just because you're wanting to, you know, set up a digital or a you know, environment, you're not a bad apple. You're a partner with us. You're growing the private sector, and follow the rules that we have. And so I see that as something that's beneficial to us, and that we want to see an SEC that has the environment that not everybody that they're regulating is an adversary. So you'll see from me a reduction of SEC bureaucracy. You will see a more focused effort in following clear rules that are set, and not looking at everybody who develops a security as the enemy.
So the SEC is, of course, an independent agency. However, the president can, to follow up on this question, sorry, I'm piggybacking, the president can, you know, can influence what happens at the agency through the appointment of the chairman, typically. And is that what you have in mind? And do you have the kind of person in mind that you would choose as chairman?
I would have a person in mind as chairman that reflected exactly what I said, and to have that philosophy, and that's where you start. So that's number one. But secondly, the president's influence is through articulating a clear message and providing leadership. So even though independent agencies, the president still can have influence on direction. The Federal Reserve is a good example of that. The Federal Reserve, I will have the chairman of the Federal Reserve in my office. You know, they hear from everybody else in the world. Why shouldn't they hear from the President of the United States? And the same thing is true for the SEC. Now, if they're an independent agency, you know, the chairman has some connection to the person who appointed that chairman, but they're an independent agency, and I understand that. But the president has influence, and I would use that influence to accomplish the balance that I recited.
So this one's from Alex. Do you believe the government is equipped to keep pace with the rapidly evolving landscape, and what specific steps will you take to ensure that government policies foster rather than hinder technological innovation?
The answer is no. I do not believe that they're prepared or equipped. And the reason is not necessarily a slap at the federal workforce, but it is the fact that you know, it's hard to recruit people who are experienced in blockchain technology into the government. They're innovators. They're looking at their own enterprises, and so you've got to create more in the talent pool. You got to have more training so that they understand new developing technologies. And that's where the partnership with industry in your association is critical. I would love to have those that have regulatory authority sitting down with you regularly to hear from you, to make sure they understand the marketplace, they understand the risks that you take, and what the goals that you have and the guidelines that are there. And if we've got some things that industry needs to do, that can be communicated. So that partnership is a critical part of what I see as a working relationship and the future development of technologies without undue regulation.
I'm going to take advantage of a little extra time we have in the schedule to ask a couple of additional ones of my own. Other jurisdictions, such as in Europe, the UK, and Asia, have made a lot of strides in regulating crypto. The U.S. customarily leads in other areas of regulation. Is this a problem, and can it be overcome by whoever occupies the White House in 2025?
The answer is yes. Whenever you look at the European Commission that has set more clear rules, that gives them an advantage. And we've always, had less bureaucracy than the European Commission, which has given us advantage, but now they have the advantage because they've set clear rules and they understand the marketplace. They're moving more quickly. And I think that what you see as dysfunction in Washington, D.C. is a reflection of Congress not being able to get legislation passed and an administration that is distracted. What would I do about it? I drive the ship. I would make sure that people are put into key positions in my administration that understand the work that you're doing and that will follow my simple mandate that I want innovation and technology to foster in the United States of America, and I want the private sector of our economy to grow faster than the government sector. That's the kind of person that I'm going to put in place, and they're going to understand that I want your industry to flourish. And with that, that's presidential leadership, and that's what I'll do.
So, last question, I think, and we'll just broaden it out to pure politics. Can a Republican bridge the Donald Trump gap to take the nomination?
The answer is I'm fighting every day to make sure that happens. Now, there's a real world out there, and Donald Trump's high in the polls, and so it's going to take the voters to say we want a different direction for America. It's going to take the voters to say I'm going to go into the Republican primary and I'm going to cast my ballot for Asa Hutchinson because he's been clear that Donald Trump would be a risk to our nation in the future. And so that gets some, that doesn't get others, it sounds like. But that's what campaigns are about. And if you want to win, if you want to change the direction of America, both from this administration, but also to the alternatives, and the polls that I see, the American public does not want a repeat of the Biden-Trump race. They don't want a repeat of that. They want different leadership. And so if that's the case, I should stay in. Everybody that has that alternative view should be in there working hard, and the voters should look at that and make that determination. So the answer is yes, I believe that's going to happen. It might not happen this year in Iowa, or it might not happen in New Hampshire. It might be happening in the Super Tuesday states, or it might be happening even after that, because that's when we're going to know a lot of the outside pressures and the result of those on the front runner on the Republican side. So this is the most unpredictable political year in my lifetime. And so we don't know what's going to happen next year and when votes start being counted. So until then, you present your ideas, you work hard. I was in a diner today in New Hampshire, and I'll be back periodically and seriously after the Iowa caucus. And so hard work, ideas, I believe still make a difference. And there's a lot of ideas that are out there, but you've got to look at someone who's actually implemented those. As governor, I had to run a state for 8 years. I had to balance the budget. I left a surplus. I cut taxes. I cut the bureaucracy. I've been tested in that time frame. I was in Congress. We balanced the budget. That was 20 years ago. That was a time when Democrats and Republicans actually worked together to balance the budget. Whenever you look at when I have handled great issues in our country during times of crisis. After 9/11, I had to protect our country from a terrorist attack. I was responsible for border security. I understand the fentanyl challenges that we have today. I was head of the DEA. And so that breadth of experience, I think, sets me apart, as well as my vision for an America that is strong, that is growing in terms of technology and competition around the world. You know, there's some candidates that say we need to have a ring around of America to protect us, a 10% tariff on every good commodity that comes to the United States of America. I don't think we need to have that protection because America can compete, and we can compete and we can win. And to me, technology has a big part of our future and of our winning.
Thanks so much, Governor Hutchinson, for sitting down with us today. We really appreciate it.
Asa2024.com. That would help us a lot. Thank you.
The last round of applause for the governor. Nice of you to go out there. Appreciate it. Now, as we transition between our presidential candidates, we have a little time to hear from Keith Ammon, who serves as a New Hampshire state representative and has sought a law that would allow people to be able to pay their state taxes and fees here in cryptocurrency. So coming up, Representative Ammon.
Stand with Crypto. Welcome to New Hampshire, everyone. My name is Keith Ammon. I'm one of the state reps, one of the many state reps in the State House. And thank you to St. Anselm's Institute of Politics for hosting and for Stand with Crypto for arranging this event. It's the first of a kind. So we're a part of history here. And there it goes. We're a part of history here. So welcome if you're from out of state. Thank you. Can you give me that back? If you're from out of state, could you raise your hand? That's maybe a third or a half of our audience, and I'm exaggerating. Welcome to New Hampshire. If you came on a bus from Harvard, raise your hand. Oh, from Boston, I'm sorry. From Boston, so great. So you guys took a field trip up here to New Hampshire, and we appreciate that. When you go back to Massachusetts, if you could just relay a message to one of your senators to be a little easier on the cryptocurrency industry. Senator Warren, you have constituents here. So I have some notes. I was going to go into a little bit of history. So in New Hampshire, me and a bunch of my geeky friends over a decade ago found out about this thing called Bitcoin. And we were talking about it like, this is going to change the world. Everybody needs to hear about this. We talked about it so much that people stopped even listening to our conversations because they were tired of hearing the same thing. My wife is in the back there. Her name is Susan. She heard me say for a decade that this is going to change the world. This is going to be a huge thing. So here we are. It's a presidential issue. A cryptocurrency question was asked at the most recent presidential debate. This is going to grow, continue to grow exponentially. And so it's important for us to shepherd this industry and make it into all the things that it could be. And at the state level, we've been doing that. It was referenced earlier that Governor Sununu signed an executive order and stood up a cryptocurrency commission. I had the privilege of serving on that commission along with some of our regulators and other industry experts. And we issued a recommendation in our final report. And now we're in the process of implementing some of those. One of the top recommendations is to grant legal personhood to DAOs. So similar to an LLC or a corporation, because blockchain allows for new ways for people to organize. not just exchange value, but exchange all kinds of information, including voting rights. So a DAO is a way for people to collectively act to do big things. So in New Hampshire, we have a history of financial innovation here. In the late 90s, early aughts, our state rewrote our entire trust laws to make them the most competitive trust laws in the nation. And so one of the chief experts and architects behind those trust laws being rewritten is helping out with this DAO bill. And that's Attorney Bill Ardinger. He was the chair of the Crypto Commission. So we have some big brains behind that legislative push. We were also one of the first states to change our money transmitter laws back in 2017 to make it so that teenagers exchanging cryptocurrency weren't violating our money transmitter laws. So that's another interesting thing. So one of the conclusions of the Cryptocurrency Commission was that blockchain it's a significant advancement in technology. It can change people's lives. I think we heard earlier all the different industries that it touches. Name an industry, and blockchain is probably improving it or disrupting it. And it's anything from agriculture to art to entertainment to banking to finance, international money transmission, healthcare, insurance, right? We know that list if we're familiar with the industry. The previous speaker mentioned about regulation through enforcement. I have a personal beef with one of our agencies. This is only my opinion, but the SEC treated library very unfairly. And we have the founder of libraries here in the audience with us, Jeremy Kaufman. So we watched as the federal government destroyed a potential competitor to YouTube. I mean, something on that scale, because they make the rules up as they go along. So we have a personal beef here with that in New Hampshire. And again, I'm speaking for myself, but I think others share my opinion. Why should you care about the crypto industry? Well, you should care about it if you're tired of inflation. Every time you go to the supermarket, the prices are higher. Tired of never being able to beat the rat race that you live paycheck to paycheck and never can seem to get ahead. Or if you're tired of the 1% getting richer and richer while everyone else gets poorer, the middle class is hollowed out. If you're tired of lack of transparency in government, blockchain can fix that. If you're tired of funding endless wars with your tax dollars, there may be a solution to that. Corporations grow in control, government grows in control, and we lose our privacy. If you care about any of those things, then blockchain is something that you should seriously investigate. Don't rely on the news media to give you your information, trust me. We heard the saying that you'll own nothing and be happy. You'll own nothing and be unhappy is probably the reality of that. But blockchain technology allows us to have ownership in the digital world. And that's what's so special about it. So we can own things and be happy. So it's important for state legislators. States are the factories, the laboratories of innovation. And it's important that states step up and lay down some of the ground rules. And that's what we're trying to do here in New Hampshire. We have a dual banking system. The states can charter banks. The states are in charge of things like insurance. We have our own securities regulations, statutes on the books. So there's a lot of parallel systems that exist at the state level. And if the federal government is going to drag its heels or enforce by, regulate by enforcement, the states like New Hampshire can step up and lead the way. And so our motto is live free or die. So we want to live free, not in the quill and parchment era, or not just in the analog era, but we want to live free or die in the digital era. So this represents freedom in the digital age. All right, and so that concludes my talk, but so I have an announcement to make. So I think some members are here from the Boston Blockchain Association. Doug, would you stand up? So New Hampshire doesn't have its own blockchain association. Isn't that weird? So I'm announcing right now, we're going to stand up the New Hampshire Blockchain Council. And we're going to put that under the umbrella of the US Blockchain Coalition, which some of you may know, Ari Yu, apologize. And recently down in Texas, I was in Fort Worth for the convention. The US Blockchain Coalition is now under the umbrella of the Global Blockchain Business Council under Sandra Rowe. Some of you may know Sandra. And so our New Hampshire Council will work under that umbrella, national and global resources, and also work in concert with our next speaker and his organization, Satoshi Action Fund. So thank you for your time.
Thanks so much for that, Representative Ammon. We'll have Vivek Ramaswamy coming up as our next candidate. But first, as was mentioned, we have a few minutes to get Dennis Porter on the stage. He's the CEO and co-founder of the Satoshi Action Fund and a big advocate for Bitcoin and digital asset policy. Dennis, welcome.
Wow. Extremely proud to be here. First of all, we got to thank Stand With Crypto, Nick Carr, and also the Institute here in New Hampshire for putting this event together. Not only is it a first in the nation, it is the first time in US history that we have had a forum like this. So extremely proud to be a part of it. Also, before I get going, I would like to thank a few very important people here. Two in particular, our local leaders. It would be Majority Leader, Osborne, and also Representative Keith Ammon. Representative Keith Ammon has done incredible amounts of work to put this state in a position to lead on all things digital assets and crypto. Not only was he a big part of the Crypto Commission that the governor put together, but he's been a big part of the Nuclear Commission, which just put out a report. And in that report, they cited Bitcoin over 40 times. And as you've just heard from him, yeah, thank you for Keith. And as you've just heard from Keith, he is now launching the Blockchain Council. The man never stops working. Today marks a pivotal moment in history, not just for Bitcoin and digital assets, but for our nation as a whole. We stand here today in New Hampshire, the freest state in our country, a state of firsts. Not only is it the first in the nation to hold its primary, congrats on holding on to that, but it is also the first state where Paul Revere rode, and the first state in the nation to declare its independence from Britain. Reflect on the moment where our country was founded. Our forefathers were united by a common cause and purpose. They had shared visions for freedom, progress, and independence. Fast forward to our current era, and we find ourselves in a country deeply divided. Our disagreements span numerous political issues, fiscal policies, foreign conflicts, border management, energy strategies, and monetary policies. Among these divisions, Bitcoin emerges as a beacon of hope. When I first discovered this technology in 2017, its potential to provide financial services to the unbanked captivated me. Here was a tool capable of offering economic empowerment to the most vulnerable. As I delved deeper, I realized Bitcoin's capacity to revolutionize our financial system, to spur rural job creation, and to enhance our outdated energy infrastructure. Yet it was over the last 2 years that I have discovered Bitcoin's most remarkable feature. It's a power to unify us as Americans. Democrats, Republicans, libertarians, and independents alike all can find common ground in the potential of this technology. In my work with Satoshi Action, I've had the privilege of engaging with diverse groups all across the country, witnessing firsthand how trust can be rebuilt through a shared commitment to a better future made possible through Bitcoin. Imagine a country where financial inclusivity is not just an ideal, but a reality, where our energy solutions are not just economical, but also sustainable, where economic policies are transparent and equitable. This is a nation where we can all embody the American dream for our citizens. Bitcoin isn't just about digital transactions, though. It's about laying the foundation for a more united society, bridging the gaps that have long divided us. Today, we stand in this historic state. Let's draw inspiration from our past. Just as our forefathers united for independence, we too can unite for a new financial and societal liberty. As we move forward, let us embrace Bitcoin, not just as a financial, energy, or an economic technology, but as a symbol of unity in these divided times. Thank you very much for having me here, and thank you again to Stand With Crypto.
Thanks so much, Dennis. Now, I think we're all set for our second presidential candidate this afternoon. We can count on biotech entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy feeling strongly about crypto policy. He was the first, as it happened, of the Republican candidates to outline his intentions for digital assets with a policy paper. Hanging among the top Republicans in national polling on the outcome of this nomination. He's been fiery on the debate stage, including in an appearance last week. Now we'll see if he brings some of that spirit to this forum. Mr. Ramaswamy, go ahead and share some thoughts before we get into our questions. Mr. Ramaswamy.
Good to see you. It's good to see you all. Am I supposed to use this one or this? Doesn't matter. This works. You guys hear me? So I'm going to kick this off with some reflections, and then I'm going to get into a moderated discussion that I'm looking forward to having. I want to go back to the founding ideals of this country. What do the people who founded this country believe? That we are the pioneers. We're the explorers, the unafraid. The people who will be unconstrained to achieve the maximum of our potential. That's what our founding fathers believed. And I think that we have lost that culture of excellence in the United States of America. So what I called it in a speech earlier today, I'm going to use it with you guys, is I call it kind of our inner animal spirit. It has been domesticated. It has been tamed by this new culture that penalizes boundless excellence and celebrates victimhood instead. And that's leapt oceans to lift up places like China. Well, their culture of victimhood has come all the way back here to hold us down. And I think, as you all know, I'm running for president as a Republican. I expect we'll be successful with your help. When we rallied behind the cry to make America great again, we didn't hunger for just a single man. We hungered for the unapologetic pursuit of excellence. That's part of what it means to be an American. And I think that's what this industry, this movement is all about. So I'm the only presidential candidate, I'm proud to be the only presidential candidate who has published a comprehensive framework for dealing with the rise and hopefully continued future rise of blockchain technology, cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, and a future that I think is thankfully inevitable. But how do we actually deal with it? What does that framework look like? There's three core policy pillars three core principles that I bring to bear. The first is the freedom to code itself. Okay. In my view, code is a form of speech. It is a form of expression, and it enjoys First Amendment protections accordingly. Now, that means it has some very specific consequences. And just raise your hand and wave if I'm saying we're using terms or referring to cases that you all aren't familiar with. But take what happened in the Tornado Cash case. Penalizing an entire protocol or entire way of doing business is illegal and unconstitutional under the current law, in contrast to going after individual bad actors. That's part of what we need to restore, is that we don't penalize modes of communication, and code is one of those modes of communication. But we do correctly penalize the things that are already illegal in a real world asset framework that's no different from digital assets. Fraud, theft, punishable, whether it's an ordinary asset or a digital asset. Well, fraud or theft applies, and the same rules apply even if you're dealing with the digital asset, so you don't get any special exemptions. But you shouldn't have any special regulatory burden, especially through this regulation by enforcement agenda that's deciding who actually broke the law based on the enforcement action that a three-letter government agency wants to bring. That's the first thing that ends on my watch, is the freedom to code. And the assault on the freedom to code, that's what's going to end on my watch. Second, the freedom of financial self-reliance. This is an age-old idea in the United States. Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson believed in the importance of financial self-reliance. Every American should be free to decide how they hold their assets. Any regulation that reaches into affecting digital wallets or effectively backdoor legislating out the use of digital wallets, I think will end on my watch. And the reason is you get to choose how you hold your own assets. And then third, and most importantly of all, because it relates to the first two, is the freedom from regulatory overreach that impedes innovation in this country. This is really the core of my campaign. If there's one thing I deliver as your next president, it is the fact that we will once again in the United States of America have 3 branches of government, not 4. Yet today it's the 4th branch of government, the unelected bureaucrats who are effectively making up the rules as they go along. I think it is shameful. It is unconscionable that you have a chief commissioner of the SEC, Gary Gensler, who has refused or was unable in his testimony before Congress to distinguish whether or not Ethereum was a security for the purposes of securities laws in this country. Ambiguity is the friend of the tyrant. That's what history teaches us. And so one of the things we have in this country right now, and this isn't specific to the area of crypto, is the fact that the people who we elect to run the government, they're not the ones who are actually even running the government. It's people who were never elected to those positions in the first place without a backstop of political accountability that are actually pulling the strings and the levers of power. So I want people to understand where my views are. Do I consider myself a pro-crypto candidate? Yes, I do. Am I pro-Bitcoin? Yes, I am. But that's not what's guiding actually my views here. What's guiding my views here, actually the founding premise of my candidacy, which is that whether or not you agree with the policies that are passed in a country, they better darn well at least have been laws that were passed through the constitutional process. So if a majority of people in this country wanted to vote in congressmen and senators and a president who was going to sign a bill into law that banned a certain class of digital assets, that banned cryptocurrency, that banned the trading of Bitcoin or Ethereum or anything else, I wouldn't agree with that policy, just like I don't agree with so many other policies that are passed by Congress. But I would still agree to abide by it as a citizen of this country. But that isn't what's happening in the country. In fact, it probably wouldn't happen given how widespread the use of cryptocurrencies are now anyway. That's not what's happening in the country. What's happening is you have unelected bureaucrats and regulators who are deciding to do through the back door what Congress never actually had the political will or the political mandate to pass through the front door. That's a constitutional violation. And the good news is we now live in a moment where the next president can actually do something about it. The Supreme Court came out last year with probably what I consider to be the most important Supreme Court case of our lifetime. West Virginia versus EPA, which held in that case that the EPA passed a rule governing the coal industry that Congress never gave the EPA the power to actually enact. And the Supreme Court said that was unconstitutional. Well, if that regulation is unconstitutional, that means most federal regulations today are also unconstitutional, including those that are impeding your sector and holding you back by the day. And so what's going to happen on my watch is we're going to have a 75% reduction of all federal bureaucrats by the end of my first term. The SEC will not be an exception or exempt from that. We will rescind any unconstitutional regulations that exceed the scope of what Congress has actually passed through the democratic process. That will be quite literally most federal regulations on the books today, without exception. And we will restore a constitutional republic where the people who we elect to run the government are once again the ones who actually run the government. That's not a black idea or a white idea. It's not even a red idea or a blue idea. These are fundamentally American ideals, actually, that we fought a revolution to secure in this country 250 years ago. And I believe deep in my heart that those ideals still exist. I'm running for president to revive them. And the thing I'd ask of all of you is, sometimes I find this among a lot of my good friends who are pioneers in your industry, is take a step outside of your industry and take a look at it from the outside looking in. Because the problem that's affecting the advances in crypto and the regulatory state that's impeding innovation and expansionism in your sector is actually not unique to your sector. I'm a biotech entrepreneur. That was at least my first company that I founded, was a large biotech company. The FDA is to the biotech and pharma industry as the SEC is to crypto, as the EPA is to the coal industry, as the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is to the nuclear energy in this country. This is pervasive. This is the wet blanket that holds back the U.S. economy from achieving our potential of 5% GDP growth per year. This is what constricts the integrity of our constitutional republic, so pioneers and explorers no longer feel free to explore as they once did. That's what this has done to the United States of America. So I would encourage the people who are in this arena to understand in a good way that this is about something that's bigger than just you. What you're experiencing is a symptom of a deeper cancer. And I think that a government that exercises power over its people owes its people two things. One is democratic accountability. That means an agency can't pass something that wasn't backstopped by democratic accountability. The second thing is transparency. That if you're asked to abide by the rules, you at least get to know with clarity what those rules actually are. Simple process we'll set up at least. I mean, you could agree on the definitions or not between the SEC and the CFTC about whether or not something is a commodity or a security. You deserve to know, rather than playing some regulatory musical chairs where you're the last person left standing when the music stops. That's not how it's supposed to work in the United States of America. It's how it works in foreign autocracies throughout most of human history. That's not how we do things in the United States of America. Reviving the Constitution and our actual principles dating back from after the Patriot Act. You want to think about the Bank Secrecy Act and otherwise, relying on doctrines like the toxic third-party doctrine. This is an unconstitutional premise over the last 25 years. It goes back to my theme. This is bigger than just you. But then you come back in the world of crypto, then you understand how deep this cancer runs. They say that, for those of you, anybody by way of hands, just so I have a sense, anybody have heard of or familiar with a word called the third-party doctrine? Does that mean anything to a couple of you? Thanks. The rest of you are honest. Usually what I find is everybody puts their hand up and then actually nobody knows what they're talking about. This is, I think actually you guys are very frank here. So thank you for that. It's very esoteric and you have no reason to recognize the words. But what it refers to is this doctrine the Supreme Court came up with in the aftermath of 9/11 in the post-Patriot Act era that was designed to actually allow for wiretapping of private citizens having conversations. And we have this pesky little thing, thank God it exists, called the Fourth Amendment in the United States that stops the government. Actually, there's other amendments too that would stop the government from engaging in unconstitutional surveillance without a warrant. Well, that's good news, except they found a workaround that. And what they said was, actually, they weren't going to enforce that, because if you have used a telephone that's provided by a third party, a telephone provider, a cell phone company. You have presumptively made your conversation public by disclosing it to that third party, the telephone company, that the government then has a right to listen in without a warrant. I mean, that doesn't withstand any constitutional muster. Thomas Jefferson would be rolling over in his grave if that's what we actually said the Constitution meant. And yet that's what they're using to now use the Bank Secrecy Act to impose that on crypto companies or exchanges or otherwise, to have to monitor the financial transactions of individuals. And so that's the theme I'll close with before we go into our moderated session here, is the imposition of the regulatory state and its overreach on the crypto sector isn't about the crypto sector. It's about the imposition of an agenda that threatens our constitutional republic itself. So for me, this goes to the core of my candidacy as your next president, if you all put me there. And those of you who are in New Hampshire residents have a special power to do that. What I'll tell you is this, is I have one job as the US president. I swear an oath to the Constitution, and my job is to actually keep it. And that requires not just the incrementalism around the edge, but the shutting down of an administrative bureaucracy and the regulations that go along with it to revive what our founding fathers would once again be proud of in this country. So with that, thank you for the warm welcome, guys. I appreciate it. Glad to be here. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thanks so much for being here. Go ahead and take that one. Thanks a lot. All right. So you mentioned in your opening remarks the tornado cash case.
Yeah.
So you want to, I think you said, end the assault on freedom to code. How exactly do you do that as president?
So where's that assault coming from? It's coming from the regulatory state. That reports into the US president. Believe it or not, you wouldn't know that today. I mean, right now, I don't spend a lot of time criticizing Biden because I don't really even see him really as operating as the president of the United States. I think he's a puppet for, and Republicans, it's not that different too, most of them at least, are puppets of the managerial class in that administrative bureaucracy, right? So I don't intend to operate as a puppet. Article 2 of the Constitution says that there is one president. The executive power of the United States shall be vested in a president. That's what it says. And so I don't believe in 100 different executive branches, each operating on their own island under the so-called guise of independence. Independence is really just a code word for lack of accountability. So I will direct all agencies to immediately cease enforcing any regulation that fails the Supreme Court's test in West Virginia versus EPA. We'll have an ombudsman in every agency who shares the Supreme Court's understanding of that to be able to go through and rescind what will almost certainly be a overwhelming majority of those federal regulations. Day one, enforcement ceases, and within the first few months, we'll have rescinded every one of those regulations that Congress never passed. Those are the regulations that are being used to effectively go after individual actors. And so as president, I run the executive branch, and we will cease executing any of those regulations that are themselves unconstitutional.
You actually, I should before I forget, we're gonna hit everyone with this question. What does yours or your family's current crypto portfolio look like?
Yeah, so I actually delegated my financial holdings to a third party to make life easier in a certain sense. I don't, so that's run independently. But my financial disclosure forms come out, and my last one came out, I think, in September 30th, I want to say, and was pretty, by normal standards, big holder of Bitcoin and Ethereum both. Mm-hmm. So that was in that last financial disclosure form, and I owned those long before deciding to run for U.S. president. So
that's the most recent record.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Now, you've of course.
I think I might be certainly first Republican. Somebody told me this. I don't know if it's true or not, but I was told that I was the first and only Republican that had ever reported on a financial disclosure form owning cryptocurrency. So I thought, oh, that was pretty interesting.
I don't know the answer to that.
But that's not why I'm adopting the policies that I am. I want to be crystal clear about that. Is
not for personal gain.
No, and that's why I leave it to third parties. I mean, there's too many politicians who are doing this anyway. And you say that as a joke, but that's actually how much of politics works. I don't think congressmen should be allowed to trade individual stocks while they're in Congress or regulators should be able to do the same thing, or regulators should be joining the boards of companies that they regulated while they were in office, or you have governors, some of whom I've, tussled with on the debate stage and otherwise, that have joined boards of military contractors after doing deals with those military contractors. I just don't think that should be happening in the United States. And so it's not because the law requires you to, but I just chose to say, hey, let's have somebody else focus on the financial portfolio, because right now I'm in a phase of my life where it's about giving back to this country. But my views on the thing that led me to see the original allure of Bitcoin was actually back when I was in law school. The vision of code is law. I find that alluring. I find it interesting to have an opt out of the existing system. And, I think that that's part of what drew me into it in the first place, but it's those same views that I think inform my views as a presidential candidate. So that's why it leads to both of those things being true.
You've made it very clear on the campaign trail and here tonight, obviously, that you'd like to mostly dismantle the federal government workforce. Do you then, to be clear, not favor the establishment of new crypto-specific regulations in the U.S.?
What do you mean by that? Favor the establishment of new crypto?
So, yeah, in your SEC, which has a quarter of the workforce or whatever your
most agencies will have about approximately, give or take, a quarter of the workforce.
Would you still be favoring them writing rules for crypto?
I think regulatory clarity is what we need. Absolutely. But I think that it needs to be regulatory clarity that is tied to the laws as they exist. Regulators cannot just arbitrarily and capriciously, to borrow the legal standard here, make up the rules as they go. And I think that that's by and large what's happening across the administrative state. And it's not unique to the SEC, I mean, to the FDA, to the EPA, to the FTC. That's what's happening today. And so my view is when you have a bunch of people showing up to work who should have never had that job in the first place, here's the problem. They start finding random things to do. And that's really what happens. I mean, look at what happened with the U.S. Federal Reserve, actually. The Fed's sole job, on my watch it will be again, should be to stabilize the U.S. dollar as a unit of measurement, period. Peg it to commodities. And you could debate which commodities to peg it to, but it has to be pegged to commodities. Instead, what you had is the academicization of the U.S. Federal Reserve since the late 90s. They decided to try to hit two targets with one arrow. Imagine trying to play that game of darts. You're going to miss both, which is what they've been doing, inflation and unemployment. And instead has been more or less arbitrarily raining money from on high when they feel like it. And real wage growth hasn't gone up in this country as a consequence. And so anyway, I said, I don't need 23,000 employees at the U.S. Fed to do that. That's a 90% reduction at the U.S. Federal Reserve to peg the dollar to commodities so the dollar has real value. And part of that problem is you got those 23,000 people showing up. That's when they then find the next thing, the CBDC, central bank digital currency. Again, these people, an idle mind is a devil's workshop is sort of the parent expression. Well, I think it's not that dissimilar from what goes on in the administrative state. Is the cancerous proliferation of the headcount itself has in some cases perpetuated a regulatory cancer that goes far beyond what our founding fathers envisioned. And my litmus test is if George Washington and Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson and John Jay, guys who disagree on a lot of things, by the way, but if they're walking around the streets of DC today and understanding what's going on in our current system, would they be proud or would they be appalled? I think they would be aghast if they see what's happening today. And the good news is the next U.S. president can fix this. I do think it takes a president who knows what the heck they're talking about. I think it's missing in our politics, just to be blunt about it. I'm a businessman. I came from the outside as an entrepreneur. I can tell you from my own firsthand experience. I mean, most politicians are vessels. They're just vehicles. Listless vessels is a term that's been used, and I agree with that, who are effectively there to recite slogans handed to them by their consultants that some donor taught them to say. I mean, that's the state of American politics today. And I think if we want to get to the essence of what's going on, it might be helpful to have somebody who, A, isn't bought and paid for by that same system, but B, who actually has a first personal understanding of fill in the blank, AI, future of medicine or healthcare or cryptocurrency in this country. And I do think it's going to take a new generation of leadership to accomplish that.
You mentioned the in passing central bank digital currency, CBDC. Do you think it's fair to suggest the Biden administration is advocating for a CBDC if there's been no position outlined apart from the Fed saying it would need Congress and the White House to ask for it? And since this Congress almost certainly wouldn't do that, what's all the fuss about on that?
Well, look, I think the Fed Now program is clearly taking steps in that direction. The fuss is also looking at other countries. I mean, you see public arguments being made and adopted in places like the UK under, supposedly even conservative leadership, because China's adopting a digital yuan, that there needs to be a central bank digital currency in the UK. And some of those same arguments are absolutely being made under Yellen and otherwise in the Treasury today. And so I think the fuss is about when you have a regulatory set of agencies that have adopted a lot of power that they're exercising without congressional consent. And then those same regulators start talking about the merits of a central bank digital currency and then start to take steps through the Fed Now program and otherwise that they send a motion that could pave the groundwork for it. Yes, I think the citizenry ought to be alert to that. And so to the contrary, maybe in your world, you would call it a lot of fuss. I challenge you, but turn on cable news and you're not going to have heard, or print media or the New York Times, there is no fuss. So I just, just in jest, but turn it around. But what's the fuss about saying that there's a fuss? Because there isn't one, right? And I think that that's actually, to the contrary, something that people actually need to be far more alert to. And the good news is I'm not overly histrionic about it. All I've said is we'll put an end to the Fed Now program and we're not going to have a CBDC on my watch, and make a clear statement to that effect. And I won't apologize for that.
We're CoinDesk. We may focus a little bit more on these issues than
that's right. You're steeped in it. You're with CoinDesk?
Yes,
okay,
that's right. So you've of course been the most outspoken presidential candidate about digital assets generally. So a bit of a crypto politics question. Some crypto insiders declare themselves single issue voters on this issue. Do you think there is a single issue voting block around crypto?
I mean, I guess you just told me there is, so I'm not going to deny. I'm not going to deny your reporting.
A few people on social media, it doesn't necessarily represent a block.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know is the answer. I think there's a lot of people to whom it's important, though, and so whether that's a single issue voter or an issue that matters to a lot of voters, I think it does matter to a lot of voters. I'm not a single issue voter, but I think that it's an important issue that needs to be addressed, and I think that. I mean, look, it is hopefully telling that it takes somebody from the outside, from a different generation with fresh legs, who comes from the business world as an entrepreneur, who supports innovation in this country, to be certainly the sole candidate in the Republican field that has the first thing to say about it. And I think that it's important that the person you put there isn't, even if eventually other candidates carbon copy everything I've said and are still saying it, I think it's important to have a presidential candidate who understands the why as well. Because otherwise, I mean, the circumstances are going to change in the future. We're not going to be able to predict what the threats are to, let alone your industry, to liberty in this country 4 or 5 years from now. It's a constant cat and mouse game between, the governed and the government. And I think that that's something that requires somebody who's anchored in the why and understanding that. And so, I can't speak for the other candidates as to why they're doing it. Maybe they're looking at where the voting blocks are and they're smart, not wasting their airtime on the issue of crypto. And maybe that's the case. I don't think that's the case. But regardless, I'm not doing it as a political calculus. I'm sharing it because it's important to me. And that's my strategy in this campaign is speak the truth, share my actual convictions. I'd rather do that and lose an election than to win by playing some political snakes and ladders. But my hope is that's going to be the winning strategy. And that's not up to me. That's up to you guys. So that's the way we're running this.
One of your convictions is that most crypto assets are commodities. Is that a correct thing to say?
As of today, I believe that's the case.
So in that view, the SEC has no business in getting in their way.
Well, I have my more foundational view, though.
Okay.
Which is whatever it is, let's be clear about it.
Okay, right.
Right. This is the worst case scenario of all. Isn't crypto assets being characterized as securities? It's whether you have any idea whether they're characterized as securities or not. And that's where we are right now. So my foundational strongest view is any government that is applying rules to its citizens deserves to ex ante, like beforehand, like before you're charged with something, deserves to tell you what those rules actually are. I think that's not too much to ask. But I want people to understand, I don't think that ambiguity is innocent ambiguity. I think it's intentional. Ambiguity is the friend of the tyrant. And so that's not a technocratic issue that we just haven't caught up with it. And this is something people need to understand, in the, nascent cottage industry of people who want to lobby for your industry or whatever. And we'll say things like, oh, we just have to educate them. It's not quite right. I think what you might find is the more you educate them in the short run, the worse it's going to be, because people understand what this actually represents. Well, look, my view is if you're trying to stifle the competition, you're not confident in your own value proposition. I want a strong and stable dollar as the next president. But part of what's going to get us there is having alternatives that hold our own feet to the fire. That's what actually being secure in your own value proposition is all about. But I think part of what's going on right now is it's not, oh, we have regulatory ambiguity and let's just get to clearing it up. Now, the country that put a man on the moon can offer at least a framework, whether a particular asset is regulated as a commodity or security in what is a man-made system of rules anyways. This isn't a problem of nature that's impossible to crack. It's a made-up man-made problem that man can easily fix, the same people who made the problem. It's intentional. And I think that that's what people need to understand and I think that's the trap that sometimes innovators will fall into. And it was similar in this world when I was in tech and in biotech, and I imagine it may be the same in your world too, is believing that there are technocratic solutions to fundamentally normative disagreements, policy disagreements. And so my policy is, and I think the real disagreement is about this. I think the government should not be able to enforce a law if even judges would differ in their interpretation of that law. If the Supreme Court comes out 5-4 in favor of the fact that some defendant is guilty of violating some financial regulation, that means 4 Supreme Court justices thought your behavior was actually lawful, and yet under the current regime, those people are still punished. I think if 4 Supreme Court justices couldn't tell you, with all of their enlightenment and erudition, that a complex security law was itself actually something that was violated, then I don't think we should expect that of normal citizens who are at behest of punishment as well. That is my view. And so, yes, I have views on whether something should or shouldn't be characterized as security or not, but that's less important than the deeper issue of purposeful ambiguity, which is what we have today. And that's what I'm ideologically against. Thank you.
Let's go ahead and move on to some of the audience questions.
Perfect.
So from Jeremy, the New Hampshire technology company library was recently sued out of business by the SEC. Both the New Hampshire state government and SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce publicly dissented with the SEC's actions in this case. What, if anything, would you do to prevent this type of SEC overreach in the future? Several library employees and supporters are in the audience today. Why should they support you for president?
Yeah, well, look, I think that maybe he wrote that question before I addressed some of this. So at risk of being repetitive, but it's so important that it's worth putting a fine point on. If Congress didn't pass the law or the regulation, then anything outside of the scope of what Congress has authorized that agency to do is unconstitutional. And when you have an agency, and so many of these agencies have the rule writer, the judge, the juror, and the executioner all in the same line of command in that agency, that's not a fair trial. There's actually a case up in front of the Supreme Court now. I don't know if it was Fish and Wildlife Service or one of the agencies, where 95%, it's not that different for the SEC, 95% of the cases that make their way through those administrative law judges are decided in the agency's favor. Who would have ever thought? The same agency that wrote the rules that gives you a judge for a fair and impartial trial comes out 95% of the time agreeing with the agency. I mean, that's something out of Soviet Russia, right? That's not the United States. And so it comes back down to gutting and dismantling that system. It's not just, oh, let's fire this. It's not individual action. I think that's what I want people to understand is people will talk about, people who don't like the FBI. We'll talk about Christopher Wray. People who don't like what the SEC is doing here. We'll talk about Gary Gensler. You're missing the point. It's not individual action. It is the Leviathan. It is the system that we need to ultimately dismantle. And so it's going to take quantum leap change. I mean, one of the ideas, I'm not committing that this is exactly how we're going to do this, but if you want to wrap your arms around this and move quickly, and I do think a president has to move quickly when we get in there and get this done. I mean, we'll go in with day one and say, if your social security number ends in an odd number and you're in the federal bureaucracy, you're out. And if it's an even number, you're in. That's not the final step. That's just the first step. On day two, it's half its size. Nothing's going to break, but at least it's more
Are you
tractable.
committed to odd versus even?
I haven't made any commitments on that.
Flip a coin.
I haven't made any commitments on that.
Okay.
But the point is, and I want people to understand this, it has to be done that way or something like it. Because otherwise you run into these complex civil service rules where they could sue back and say, oh, it's political retaliation or a civil rights violation. And this is why presidents don't downsize the administrative states. They're told, somewhat understandably, that this is exactly what's going to happen. Well, I think it takes somebody who understands those rules, say that doesn't apply to mass firings, mass reductions in force. Mass reductions in force are absolutely what we're bringing to the federal bureaucracy. Most of the regulations that were likely applicable in that case wouldn't be applicable regulations on my watch, let alone the misapplication that you could have Hester Pierce or others that pointed to in her dissenting opinion. And I also think that even if you have 3-2 in terms of, I don't know if that was a 3-2 instance or not. Was it 3-2 or was it? Yeah, that was 3-2. It kind of take the same standard, which is if there's two freaking commissioners of the SEC that think that this wasn't a violation of the rules, then on what planet are we expecting some ordinary entrepreneur trying to mind his own business believe that that was somehow illegal behavior if two of the very top 5 people at the entire top of the agency thought it was fine, acceptable behavior too? That's not the United States. That resembles some type of Soviet 1980 era alternative. And I think that we need a U.S. president. I mean, that's where the buck stops with the administrative state. You know, U.S. president who stands for the rule of law in this country with one executive branch, an actual separation of powers, that the people who make the rules are different from the people who enforce them, who are different from the people who interpret them. That's not too much to ask, and that's what I'll restore in my presidency.
So we've just got a little bit of time left.
Thank you.
It was a very good question from Justin. I think small crypto businesses across the country are creating jobs in underserved areas, just like my business is in rural Ohio. What would your administration do to help grow this new industry in forgotten communities like mine that have been ravaged by manufacturing moving overseas?
And just give me the first part of which industry we're talking about.
It's crypto, small crypto businesses across the country.
Small crypto businesses across the country. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, look, I think that the government's the main obstacle, right? I mean, I think there's two elements. It's sort of two forces required. Okay. One is the fountainhead of innovation in this country. And I think that there is a real threat there too. We have a culture that penalizes boundless innovation. You're taught, even if you go to the educational system now, if you're the highest achieving kid in the class, you're taught to hide it, taught to apologize for success and who you are. And that's not something the government's going to fix. But that is a cultural failure right now that the US president can set a role to say that you don't have to apologize for success or achievement in this country. Success is cool. Achievement is cool. If you're going to stand out, be outstanding. Okay. That's something you don't have to apologize for. But I think the other side is, even when you do have those rare people who are willing to do it, small businesses, and my view is, why stay a small business if you're, if you're operating a crypto small business in part of the country? My wish for you is, if you want it to be so, you can make it a big business through your own success and reaching people who actually want your services. You should have a government that doesn't stand as an obstacle in your way. And I think that as long as we're following the laws as they're already enshrined, and you shouldn't be able to lie to somebody and tell them you're going to sell them something that you don't actually sell them. You shouldn't be able to cheat somebody and go into their house and steal their property whether it's a digital asset or not, or whether it's a USB stick that holds passwords inside somebody's house, that's theft. And just because that's a digital asset on there doesn't change that law that you still can't walk into somebody's house and steal that USB stick. Restore some clarity to say that we've always had new kinds of assets that have evolved. Keep the laws intact that we already have, but don't penalize a new asset for simply being in the category of new. And with that view, I think we're going to not only respect our constitutional republic, but we're going to unlock a wave of innovation and economic growth in this country that we haven't seen in a long time. You know, if I just ask, just out of curiosity, how many of you do live in New Hampshire who are in this audience? Good number of you. Is every one of your votes here in this primary, you could argue it's the equivalent of 1 million votes when you show up. And many of you are not traditional, I assume, many of you are not traditional Republican primary voters who get polled right now. I think we're actually going to shock the polls, which is perfect because many of you don't get polled. But as long as you all come out and each of you bring 100 people with you, that's a significant portion. If you bring 100 people with you out on January 23rd here in New Hampshire, that's a significant impact on what you're going to have in the race. And so in a certain sense, know that the industries, other industries, are the biggest legacy incumbents or the people at the big banks that want to stifle the rise of new crypto alternatives or otherwise. They have a lot of people arguing for their interests, right? A lot of super PACs supporting their causes. Well, you can't just look at somebody else and throw your hands in the air and say, hey, why are we suffering the doom and gloom? I'm asking you guys for your help as well. If you like, you don't have to agree with 100% of what I've said, but if you like most of what I've said here and elsewhere in the campaign, if we're going to be saved, it's going to be because we save ourselves. And so I'm going to ask you guys to do your part. Come out on January 23rd to the Republican primary caucus. That's actually the primary election. That's what makes a difference. Bring 100 people with you who are like-minded. And we're going to not only shock the world here in New Hampshire. If I win New Hampshire, I'm your next president. If I'm your next president, we get done the things I'm telling you we're going to get done. So thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so
I
much.
appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Great. Great. Now, up next is Paul Graywall, Chief Legal Officer for Coinbase and a leading voice in what's shaped up to be the most important crypto policy battleground in the U.S., and that's, of course, the legal one, especially in the industry's disputes with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Paul, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. Very much appreciate that warm welcome. I appreciate even more the opportunity to just have a moment to address this impressive gathering of crypto enthusiasts, yes, but enthusiasts for much broader principles I think we've already heard about this afternoon from two of the presidential candidates joining us here in New Hampshire. It is striking to me that in a presidential election, we are now hearing such diverse topics as tornado cash and the focus on fraud, not founders, being discussed in an august setting like this one. It is striking to me that we are hearing about Supreme Court cases like West Virginia versus EPA that talk about regulatory overreach and the proper role of the fourth branch of government in a three-branch structure like we have under our U.S. Constitution. It is also striking to me that we have, yes, candidates for the Republican nomination, but also a candidate for the Democratic nomination coming together to talk about core principles, putting aside lots of things that separate them and focusing on a handful of issues that as Americans, we should all be able to agree on. It's in that same spirit that over the past year, Coinbase has taken on a certain number of initiatives in the courts, in our legislature and elsewhere to try to bring some semblance of clarity to the industry that we all work in and to give us all some semblance of confidence that we know what the rules are when we go about trying to build our businesses, whether they are small businesses, medium businesses, or yes, even large cryptocurrency exchanges like ours. That focus on simply getting clarity is what animates what we're trying to do in our various efforts. And it's also something that frankly that inspires the leadership at Coinbase as we go about that work, knowing that we are not doing this alone, nor are we doing this on our own behalf or for our own benefit. It is not easy as a public corporation to take on responsibilities that go beyond simply what's in it for our shareholders. But that's very much the mindset and the attitude that we took when we set upon a very specific direction roughly 12 or 18 months ago to get clarity from the Securities and Exchange Commission on what the rules ought to be for digital assets, to support legislation that's now moving its way through the House on market structure and on stable coins, and to change the tenor of the debate and frankly the discussion that we're having in this country about who is crypto. Because when I hear the crypto community across this country characterized as shadowy supercoders, you heard that one? I sure have. I don't know how to square that with what I'm looking at right now. Because as I look out across this audience, I don't see anything shadowy. I may see a few coders out there, but I certainly don't see anyone acting to undermine the basic principles that this country was founded upon. What I see are people just asking to be left alone under rules that they understand to support their family, their friends, and their communities in ways that we as Americans should be proud of and not demonize. So I'm here to just say thank you to all of you who have sent a note of encouragement and support as we've gone about our fight with the SEC and our push for legislation. Or maybe you haven't reached out at all, but you're building great applications, great use cases, great tools that are going to make a real difference to real Americans in ways that we can all be proud of. We take a lot of inspiration from you all. We take a lot of pride in being part of, just one part, but part of a broader cryptocurrency and digital asset community. And we are especially proud to be here today to bear witness, if I may say, to presidential candidates talking about the issues that matter to us. I take a lot of pride in that. I hope you all take a lot of pride in that. Let's keep going. And with that, let's get back to the conversation. Hamilton's going to take us to the next candidate. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot, Paul. If you get a chance to speak with Paul more on these points, take it. Coinbase is definitely at the eye of a fascinating storm. So we're moving on to the final presidential candidate we'll have on the stage today. He was also a businessman before he became a Democratic member of Congress from Minnesota. Congressman Dean Phillips, who is leaving the House after his third term next year, has taken the leap of challenging the incumbent from his own party, President Joe Biden, not as an opponent of his policies, but with the argument that it's time for the next generation in U.S. politics. Since it's unlikely President Biden is going to be eager to join his challenger on stage for a debate, we get to hear from him here. So, Congressman Phillips, welcome.
Well, how about that? I could actually hop up on the stage. Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. You're looking a little tired. I'm here to cheer you up. I'm Dean Phillips. I want to thank you for the warm introduction. And to all of you, I thought I'd tell you a little about who I am and what I'm doing here. And believe it or not, I'm actually a politician who does not know it all. And I would love to hear from you, especially on the subject near and dear to your hearts. My life started by losing my father in Vietnam, 1969. He took an ROTC scholarship to the University of Minnesota because he couldn't afford college, was sent to Vietnam just a few months before I was born in 1968, and was killed in July of 1969 in a Huey helicopter crash, just a few days after the U.S. landed on the moon. And I think regularly about him looking up, along with other soldiers in Vietnam, at the moon, seeing America at its very, very best, and looking down at their boots in Vietnam and seeing us at our very worst. And I think we are still a country that will face that choice once again here in 2024 and beyond. What kind of country do we want to be? Do we want to go to the moon, Or do you want to continue too often to wreak havoc in the spirit of defending freedom and liberties all around the world? When he died, I was 6 months old. My mom was 24 and widowed, so we lived with my great-grandparents for the first 3 years of my life. And when I was 3 years old, I got lucky. Unlike most kids who lost their dads in Vietnam or who lost moms and dads in Iraq and Afghanistan, I got lucky. I was adopted by a wonderful man into an extraordinary family with businesses and philanthropy, a lot of advice. My grandma was Dear Abby and my aunt was Ann Landers. For a certain generation, you'll smile and laugh, and others will not know what I'm even talking about. But I was fortunate, and I lived on both sides of advantage. My great-grandfather used to tell me, Dean, money is like manure. If you stack it up, it stinks. And if you spread it out, it fertilizes. And I would imagine that means something to all of you here today. He also said business is a means to an end, and the end is not to aggregate as much wealth as humanly possible. It is to share as much as humanly possible. And that's what he inspired me to do in our businesses. Helped build Belvedere Vodka into one of the most successful luxury vodka brands in the world, sold that to LVMH, and then entered the ice cream business, trying to disrupt that, which we did with Talenti Gelato. I hope some of you enjoy that in the audience. Sold that to Unilever. And I was watching the 2016 election with my family, and I was shocked and frankly dismayed by the outcome. But it was really the next morning that affected me deeply. I woke up to the sound of my 16-year-old daughter crying in her bedroom. She had just overcome Hodgkin's lymphoma. She's a gay woman. I did not know that at the time. And I saw fear in her eyes that I'd never seen in my children in this country, while I surely know a lot of parents wake up to their children in tears for different reasons. So I promised them I would do something. And I ran for Congress against the advice of just about every friend and every advice I solicited, including a lot I didn't. And I flipped a district that had been held by Republicans for 60 years, since 1958. And beat a guy who had won that night by 14 points. And I did so with a very simple strategy: invitation versus confrontation. And that's the spirit of what I'm here for today, to invite you to have a conversation. I wish more politicians would invite deliberation, debate, education, and participation, rather than simply condemn, confront, and dismay this entire country because they think they know it all. And I'll close with this. Congress is an unmitigated mess. You all know that. When I got there in 2019, I was shocked and dismayed that both the Democratic leaders and Republican leaders, not only do they not have any intention to push us together and educate us, prepare us, they actually wanted us separate. Systemic separation starts on day one: separate buses, separate events. They don't want us to have any time to do anything, to organize, so they make sure we are constantly trying to fundraise. They also don't want to educate us. And I will tell you, the biggest issue I think we're facing in this country right now on this issue and so many others is there are very few people in the United States Congress that get it, and even fewer who have the intention to understand it. As you might know, there are two crypto bills right now kind of pending, if you will, in front of financial services. One finally passed out of committee. It only has 8 co-sponsors. The other one was launched in July of this year, July 20th, and it has 0 co-sponsors. And I will tell you, it's not because there are no good people in Congress. There are. But there are very few, frankly, from a generation that gets it, from a generation that actually wants to work together. And as the former vice chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus, I am one of those, and the second most bipartisan member of the entire US Congress. That's who I am. So I will wrap up my remarks with that. I do not know it all, but I can tell you this. The 2 leading candidates right now, on both the left and the right, for the US presidency are absolutely not in positions to understand it, prepare us for it, anticipate it, and lead us into the next century. When I say that, that's the 22nd century. Kids being born right now will live into the 22nd century. Joe Biden and Donald Trump, at their age and stage of life, are simply not the right people to lead us forward. I'm sure you might have heard that from some others today. In the case of Joe Biden, I think he's a good man. But I'm not here to demean him. I'm here to introduce myself and let you know there is a generation ready to lead. AI is going to be the most disruptive, treacherous challenge the United States has faced perhaps in our history. So we have a choice. We can either prepare, anticipate, plan, or we can ignore until it's too late. Same thing with crypto. It is not irresponsible or unreasonable to think that your government would do 2 things at once. Both consider regulations, but at the same time, consider how transformative in a positive way it can be. And that's why I'm here to make my remarks to you and answer your questions. That's how we should be looking at AI. That's how we should be looking at crypto. Web3, generally, the good it can do, the costs it can save, the liberation it can bring to this country and the world, right? Same thing with AI, the costs that can be reduced, right? The outcomes that can be enhanced in healthcare and other ways, but also the risks that it will bring with it. That's how we should be leading this country. That's why I'm running for president. And with that, I'll turn it all over to you. And I thank you. And I also apologize because I represent the United States Congress right now, and I can only imagine what it's like to constantly be beating your heads against the wall, wondering what the heck is going on. That's why I'm running. I hope we can change this. I can't do it alone. I need all of you, and I thank you. Oh, now I sit. I get to sit.
Oh, yeah, sit down. Make yourself at home. Some water.
Thank you.
So, yeah, we'll just ask you a few questions, and then we'll get to some of the audience's questions.
Great.
So, in your 3 terms in Congress, you haven't amassed a crypto record.
Well, what could I amass it on?
Fair enough. But let me ask you what I've asked the other candidates here. Have you ever personally invested in crypto, NFTs, or the like?
I have not. Not
Any
because
family members?
No, none of which I'm aware. Not because I'm not interested. In fact, I am. But I will tell you, as someone who has seen corruption front and center in Washington, I elected to put all my resources in a blind trust some years ago. So I do not trade in it. I do not know what's in it. So, with that said, let me tell you something. That's a really interesting question. I do not know. I do not know if I own any crypto assets because I have a blind trust and I cannot know, which is kind of interesting. Yeah. Huh? That's kind of the point. Trust, so right? I'm glad you asked it, and I'm glad I reminded myself that I do not know and I shouldn't know.
Right.
Yeah. And as far as I know, none of my family directly does either. But I will tell you this. I try to avoid, I would have avoided personal investment because anything that I think Congress has to regulate, I think presents a natural conflict of interest, whether it's trading a specific equity, a certain commodity or other asset for obvious reasons. And I think that's a best practice generally. So it's not because I'm disinterested.
So you noted that your grandmother wrote a very famous advice column called Dear Abby that was syndicated in newspapers across the country. Newspapers, for any students or young people in the audience.
You used to wake up in the morning and look at them. Yeah, they were big. They were actually paper and they were big. And
they bring it to your house.
You could hide yourself behind them.
Really, an amazing thing from yesteryear. So let me pose this question to you in a format your family member made famous. Dear Congressman Phillips, I'm a crypto business, and we've had a tough time of it since FTX imploded, and now Binance is in trouble with the law. We want the government to issue rules, but Congress isn't giving us new laws, and the SEC is coming. What am I supposed to do in the meantime? Signed, most of the crypto industry. So
not
my apologies to your grandmother for
not lovelorn in Louisiana.
What advice would you give?
Yeah, so I want to acknowledge that I was a former member of the Financial Services Committee. I kind of regret that I'm no longer. I took a position on the Small Business Committee, especially as COVID started, and I tried to add value in that capacity. But it'll take Fit 21, which I'd like to, and I want to hear. I hope you're all aware of that. That's the one that Patrick McHenry has kind of pushed through the Financial Services Committee. I do not believe Maxine Waters would have done so. First, like I said, I somewhat apologize because this is the dysfunction of government that is causing havoc in so many ways. It's not doing its job. It's not This should have been well behind us already. A regulatory environment, a protective environment, but also an environment that fosters innovation. And by the way, I'll apply that same lens to artificial intelligence. We should make sure we don't stifle innovation, that we don't stifle decentralization when it is thoughtful and supportive of our national interests. And that's true in crypto as it should be in AI. So I do think the Fit 21 bill is one that should be considered. I'm doing it right now, which is one of my invitations to all of you. I want perspective. When I'm president, I will not know everything, and I will surround myself with people on both sides of an issue and make a decision that I think is in the best interest of the country. I will say this. Well, so that's the answer to your question is I would understand how frustrated you must be. And I do think that it is time to identify, to clarify even do you want it to be a currency? Do you want it to be an asset? Do you want it to be overseen by the SEC or not? Should it be a new agency? I do believe that the US dollar should remain the reserve currency. I think that is a lever that is very important to the United States in this day and age. It's not one I want to lose. I love the privacy elements of crypto. I love the fact that it eliminates so many hands in the pot that take little bits out here and there that add costs in a time where life is so unaffordable. But I also want to ensure that that privacy doesn't come at a cost as well as it relates to nefarious use. So I'm sure you all would agree with that. And I think that's why we have to make thoughtful decisions. And that's why I certainly don't come to you with my hardened heart, if you will, because I think these are the conversations we need to start having. And it's getting awfully late in the game to do so.
So, I mean, you brought up Congressman McHenry and that legislative effort. Certainly, he and his colleagues would welcome democratic negotiation and involvement, and you are a member of Congress. Sure. So why isn't it there?
Well, we have a lot of folks. I mean, you can imagine. I mean, everything in Congress is a fire drill. I'm on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I'm the Middle East. I'm the ranking member of the Middle East Subcommittee on Foreign Affairs. You can imagine what my life has been like this year. The vice ranking member of the Small Business Committee, as we try to rectify both some of the injustices and crime that was attendant to the Paycheck Protection Program. I've got lots of focuses. I think crypto is darn important. In fact, I'm running for an executive position because I'm getting awfully frustrated being one of 535 in an institution that does not seem focused on actually resolving problems. And I think we need an executive who A, understands, and B, has the intention to spearhead that. Everything starts in the executive office. And to answer your question, I come here, though, looking at that bill. I think Henry Cuellar is the only Democrat that has actually signed on to it. Tom Emmer from the state of Minnesota, I'm sure you all know, the whip is a fellow member of the Minnesota delegation. There is a little bit more energy behind it, but it is simply because I'm not on the Financial Services Committee. It had not been one of my priorities. That said, in the White House, it has to be, because this is one of the issues that has gone unattended to. And I think in conjunction with AI, it should be introduced to the country in a thoughtful manner so people understand it. Because you have a bunch of people, a lot of old people in Washington who do not understand it. And when you don't understand something, you simply want to regulate it. You want to squeeze it. You want to prevent it. You want to limit it. If you don't, let's just ban TikTok, right? Let's just, let's just regulate something. Let's just keep it away from others. Let's issue a digital dollar because that's what we should. They don't get it. And I think that's one of the great crises we're facing in the United States.
So one thing Congress did mandate not that long ago was an IRS rule. Have you followed the IRS's proposal on taxation of crypto?
Modestly.
And okay, and to whatever extent you have followed it, do you think it meets Congress's expectation from the infrastructure bill?
Not particularly. Do you? I'd like to hear this. This is exactly why
We're here to hear from you.
Well, no, I understand. But I'll tell you, if I don't take advantage of time with all of you, I'd like to hear about the Fit 21 bill. Is there any comment on it? If I leave here today and don't hear from any of you what you think, I have completely failed in my fundamental mission, which is to listen. You're
not
and I mean, I know it's the culture of politics where the questions are always asked of the candidates, and it puts candidates in a position where they somehow think they are supposed to know it all, and they don't. So they make things up, and then they make it up, and then they have to hold themselves to it. So might I turn that to all of you before, I think we have 11 minutes and 50 seconds left. If I leave here, I'm going to be very disappointed without your perspectives on the subject question you just asked, but also the Fit 21 bill in particular, because that is the one I'm taking a look at right now. And I don't want to cloud it by telling you what I think until I hear from you.
Well, we will get a few questions from the audience in this session, but also I'm sure they'd be happy to talk to you after.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've got to pop in a car and head out of town. But anyway,
that's chase you out in the parking lot.
Yeah, that wouldn't be the first time.
So there is a blockchain caucus in Congress, and you're not a member of that, correct?
No, I don't think. Well, I'll tell you another dirty secret about Congress. There are hundreds of caucuses. Right. Every group that comes to your office says, "Will you join the caucus?" And most of the time, you say yes because they don't do anything. And all it is that check in the box, like, well, if you're on the blockchain caucus, you must be a committed member. Find me 2 people on that caucus who understand even what blockchain is or what Web3 is. My goodness, I'd be shocked. But I'd entertain the idea if it did something serious. But I don't just check boxes for the heck of it. And that's part of the problem right now, is that's how things kind of operate right now. Who's the chair? Who are the co-chairs?
Shout out. Who's running the caucus now?
Stephen Lynch. And who else?
Lynch.
And Tom. Okay, well, yeah, there you go. Okay,
Yeah,
all right,
Lynch.
Emmer and Lynch. Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'll be heading to Washington later this week, and I'll chat with them about that. And if you see me become a member, you inspired me. See? Now, have they done anything? Have they done anything meaningful? No, I'm not surprised.
I think it was in May, you called for quote.
It's a good way to raise money, by the way, just so you know. Be the co-chair of a caucus that does nothing, and then you go to events and you're the one. And even though you haven't done anything, you seem to be the leader of the enterprise. That's how it works. Sorry, I hate telling the truth like this, but because I know people get mad at that, but I say the quiet part out loud.
Yeah, well, you're here for some truth, right? Mm-hmm. So you called for standardizing cryptocurrency transactions, suggesting that would help raise U.S. tax revenue. Can you explain what you meant by standardizing?
Well, first of all, in the grand scheme of things, for the country to consider the changes forthcoming, whether it's blockchain and crypto, whether it is AI, whether it's the fact that right now, I believe, based on reports and research I've seen, there are hundreds of billions of dollars a year in taxes that are due that simply go uncollected. And I would just pose to you all that I think it's in our best interest to ensure that people pay their taxes and that we not allow people to use mechanisms available to us to avoid them. So when I talk about standardization, when I talk about transparency, I also believe deeply in privacy and deeply in freedom and deeply generally in decentralization, especially as it relates to our federal government. Even physically, by the way, I should say. I think our federal government should be decentralized around the country. I think one of the big problems is this repulsive and dangerous bubble in which the entire enterprise is surrounded. So, as we look at 21st century, 22nd century revenue, which, by the way, you all know, we have a $33 trillion debt right now. We have a $2 trillion annual deficit that no party now seems to care about whatsoever. And now our debt service is going to go from $400 billion a year roughly to $800 billion a year in the face of rising interest rates. Which, now you could argue that the United States economy can accommodate more debt, but I don't think our federal government can accommodate more debt service because $800 billion a year is literally leaving the Congress with almost nothing to allocate itself. So the answer to the question is, when I think of standardization, I want to broaden this discussion, which is how do we generate revenue, ensure it is captured, ensure it is hard to avoid. People want to avoid the notion of a consumption tax, which is what most developed nations in the world do because it does not allow people to avoid their taxes, right? Which is why I think we are hundreds of billions of dollars a year deficient. So as I contemplate that question, I would ask that you also contemplate, how do we look at this? How do we look at the existing system, new systems, decentralized systems, and ensure that there is some way that if you are a citizen of the United States, a participant in this economy who owes to your government, our government, that you pay your taxes. And that's why your IRS question, I think, is one that must be considered. And that's why I think we have to broaden this whole discussion to ensure that whatever environment, whatever regulations, whatever laws we employ, we ensure that we can do so in an effective manner. And maybe this is the answer. Maybe blockchain is the ultimate answer. I don't know. It possibly is. Maybe someday we move to the entire economy to a blockchain economy. But maybe, yeah, maybe.
Let's get to some of the audience questions that we have here. And this one's going to sort of recap a little bit of what we talked about. This one's from Mike.
Okay.
In July, crypto legislation moved in Congress for the first time since 2016. Stablecoins and a market structure bill to protect consumers passed 2 committees and 3 hearings across party lines. Do you think the Democratic Party is starting to move past the crypto winter to provide a regulatory framework to protect consumers, like in FIT 21, which was something we discussed?
No, I just have to be forthright. There are just very few people in the United States Congress, probably even fewer in the Senate because of its age, that really understand this and therefore prioritize it. And that is, so no, I think I'm glad it was passed out of the Financial Services Committee, because I do think we should have more bills brought to the floor for members of Congress to opine on, because in the absence of bringing it to the floor, it doesn't put pressure on any member to understand it. And by definition, if you're going to be voting on something on the House floor, you got to at least understand the basics of it. And there are mechanisms in place, I think, on both sides of the aisle, frankly, because it did pass the committee in a Republican-controlled House. I'm not sure if Mike Johnson has the intention to bring this bill to the floor, but once it passes a committee, which it did, all it takes is the Speaker of the House to bring it to the floor. And unless it has 2/3 majority support, in which case we put it under something called the suspension calendar, but it should get to the floor so it can be debated. But right now, no, there's no interest, there's no energy, there's no understanding. And I would ask, and this is where all of you come in, you're all voters, you're all constituents of some member of Congress and some senator. I am too. I would encourage you to make appointments, ask to speak with the staff at least, and eventually to the member, because at the end of the day, that's the only way the system of government works, our system of governance works. If you speak with your representatives and try to educate them on something important to you. Right now, there is no energy, none. So true. And by the way, let me say this too, saying the quiet part out loud, members of Congress spend 10,000 hours per week raising money collectively, 10,000 hours. I can't find a friend to go to dinner with on a Wednesday night because they're all going to packed dinners, getting their white envelopes and their checks. I'm the only member of Congress, 535 people, I don't take $1 in PAC money of any kind. I don't take $1 of lobbyist money. I don't take $1 from a fellow member of Congress, because it's just money laundering. And I don't have a leadership PAC. And if you Google that, look at what it is. It's just a damn slush fund. I'm the only one out of 535 people. So I actually take visits from people who are not here to give me a check. That's not true with a lot of people in Congress. That's how that game works. Access is usually through money. And then who do they spend time with? Only the wealthy and well-connected. That's why I'm up here in New Hampshire right now, spending time listening to people. You don't have to bring a check to be heard, but in Washington you do. And I'm getting sick of it. And that's something we had to change.
I think this question sort of represents the vibe of a lot of them, but Kent asks, is it okay for the US to lose innovation and face brain drain to other countries if crypto policy is still unclear, if not borderline hostile?
No, it's a big deal. And this is what I'm getting at as it relates to both AI, as it relates to any new technologies. First of all, our immigration policy right now, I think is painfully deficient. We're losing, we are investing in the education of some of the best and brightest world citizens, only to lose them to other countries, whether they return to China, they go to Canada, you name it. No, it is a serious risk. Look at Russia. Why are we not talking about a post-Putin Russia, a failed nation with a brain drain of extraordinary consequence, especially in tech? No, we have to work harder to not just maintain it, but to attract the best and brightest, create an ecosystem in which we have thoughtful regulation, but that doesn't stifle innovation. And look at when our competitors are, in some cases, tyrants, in some cases, authoritarians, or dictators, if you will. It's hard in a democracy to ensure we maintain that environment. But that's why I think we need leaders, and that's why I'm running to be a leader who is thoughtful, relative, agnostic as to politics, but very focused on principle. And that's why I think it's time for massive change in the executive branch, because if we don't do it there, it's sure not going to happen in Congress. And that's the answer to the question. Same is true with AI, same crypto. We have to, the entire future of not just the US, but the entire world will be predicated, I think, in no small degree on these two significant, massively disruptive and also massively potentially accretive technologies. And I mean by that, of course, AI and Web3 generally. We should be world leaders, and that means we should maintain the most important levers of power, not kinetic, but institutional, financial, and otherwise, because I do believe those will be the most important assets of the 21st century.
This one may end up being the last one we have time for, unfortunately. It's an interesting one, I think, from Sarah. Recognizing the importance of technological literacy in the evolving world, what will your administration implement to integrate technical and engineering education into school curriculums to prepare the next generation of the digital economy?
Beautiful question. Why we don't already have a pre-K for all system in which kids literally in their earliest years start to become proficient in technologies of the future, and that we inspire them and we give them the tools and we give them the incentives and the inspirations to become the giants of the 22nd century. That to me is the America that I'm looking to build. Raise the foundation for everybody. I don't know about all of you, but I remember more from elementary school and high school, not sitting in the classroom looking at a blackboard, but it was the times I got out of class. It was either the movies or the experiential field trips that inspired us, right? And probably like all of you, I have a couple teachers that I really remember fondly as being exceptional, and a lot of average ones. So let's connect these dots. Let's start with pre-K education for all to ensure that no matter your zip code, no matter where you live, no matter how you pray, you think, you eat, or how much money your parents had, that you all have the same chance. And I think we should extend that into elementary school. I think every elementary school should have a business day like I had. Set up a lemonade stand, make some t-shirts, something where you understand a P&L and a balance sheet.
Sell
My goodness.
gelato.
Sell gelato, right? Maybe not vodka. But you understand my point. We are still enabling and essentially a 19th century education system in the 21st century world. We're paying teachers 81% of our per capita GDP when the countries leading in education, South Korea, others, pay about 130 to 140%. They identify the best teachers at young ages and bring them through the system, right? The highest paid public employee in every state in America, you know who it is? A sports coach, football or basketball coach, the highest paid public employee. By the way, not just by a little bit, but by massive amounts, publicly paid employees. Why don't we reward teachers and police officers and public contributors in a different way? And let's start with giving kids the tools at a young age so that we can start this transition, the AI transition particularly, right now. And if we start the job training when you're 3, 4, and 5 years old, my goodness, it'll cost a whole lot less than if we start when you're 35. Makes perfect sense to me. I think that's common sense. That's not Democratic or Republican. That's just darn reasonable. And that's the kind of president I intend to be. If you want.
Well, thanks so much for braving the event today as the lone Democrat on the
Oh,
stage.
I didn't even know that. Who gives a hoot?
Uh,
I mean, seriously, everybody, get the D or the R at the end of the name. It's like you can only take one of two trains. You can only take one of two trains to this place, right? So, my name is Dean Phillips. The parties are the problem. I'm just going to be forthright with you. If you do nothing else tonight, do the lowest tech thing imaginable. Go read George Washington's farewell address and look at what he warned us against. Look at what he warned us against. Factions, political parties, because they didn't exist when he was president. He warned us about American regionalism, the provincialism that's really dividing our country, rural and urban. And he warned us against foreign influence. This is 200 and some years ago. That's the problem. Yes, I'm a proud Democrat, but I'm going to lead like a common sense American, and that's, I think, what our country needs. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Congressman.
Keep the faith, everyone.
Thanks. So, excuse me. I'd like to just take just a moment to thank the audience here on behalf of CoinDesk before I hand it back to Nick. This event has made a little bit of history today. I'd argue bringing these issues into the campaign trail in this focused way, and we've heard some thoughtful responses, I think, from the candidates who were here. It'll be really fascinating, I think, to come to the same event in 2028 to see what it looks like then, where we are at that point. But first things first, getting through 2024. So let's thank the candidates for talking with us today at the final round of applause, if still here. And I'll hand it over to Nick Carr to wrap things up for us.
Let's give a big round of applause to Jesse. What an incredible moderator for the day. Thank you, Jesse. Well, Thank you again for joining us for a historic day, the first in the nation crypto presidential forum. I think we can say it was a huge success. So again, thank you for joining us. This was an incredible day. I want to thank again our media partner CoinDesk, all of you here, and everyone watching at home and live streaming as well. And now to wrap things up, there will be a reception hosted by Coinbase down the hall. So please follow signage down the hall for the reception hosted by Coinbase. Thank you again.